so a little bit about us. So we are a not-for-profit corporation. We are organized under the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. We provide services across Canada to individuals and firms and small businesses across the country. We have a head office in Toronto. We have employees, though, across the country and in most provinces. And we're here to help financial services consumers who have a complaint against a bank or an investment firm that they haven't been able to resolve with the firm themselves. We are independent of government. We are independent of industry. We're independent of consumer advocacy organizations. We sort of sit outside of all of those groups. But we do have a mandate from securities regulators and banking regulators to do the work that we do. And there is some oversight and some requirements on us to perform that work. But we're not a part of government, and we're not funded by government. And we have a board of directors that has 10 members. 3 of them are what we call industry directors, so they represent different sectors of or they come from different sectors of the industry. And we have 1 dedicated consumer interest director, who's a person who's selected for their background, familiarity with consumer advocacy issues, and the rest are unaffiliated community directors. So here's a few sort of fast facts, and it's pretty tough to see that screen from where you're sitting, but it's a snapshot of the numbers from last year. So last year we helped out over 10,000 Canadians who reached out to us with a question, a complaint or a question. They reached out to us for guidance and assistance. We have phone line, web forms, email inboxes, and so on. So make it accessible for people to reach out to us. We responded over 10,600 inquiries last year. And I'll speak in a couple minutes about what those were about and where they went. We also conduct fair and accessible investigations, a process I'm going to describe to you. But in 2022, we completed over 1,000 investigations. So it's a high volume of investigations that we're doing. We provide these services to clients of over 1,530 participating firms. So it's a broad range. And we have a compensation limit of $350,000. So complaints above that would be out of our mandate, but we're looking at complaints under that level. Before I sort of dig deeper into like OBSI and what we're really all about and how we work, I'll just mention that we are part of a broader network of financial services ombudsmen. And this is something that I didn't quite realize before I joined OBSI, but it's something that I've been really interesting to be a part of. The reality is that there is a financial services ombudsman in literally almost every country in the world. Whether it's a common law system, a civil law system, no matter the level of economic development, if a country has a government and has a financial services sector, it's very, very likely that there's a financial services ombudsman in place doing fundamentally the same work that we do. And there is an international network of financial services ombudsmen where we sort of exchange views and ideas and share experiences. But it's an interesting phenomenon that this is such a common solution to a very universal sort of set of needs. And so I think the reasons why there are ombudsmen everywhere is because of the services respond to needs. There's the private purposes, right? So obviously when ombudsmen are called for, there's a financial services firm and a customer of that firm that have a problem. There's an unresolved dispute. They need a solution to that problem. So clearly, providing actual assistance to to the parties is an important purpose. But also, in Canada certainly, and around the world, the court system is really not accessible. It's not intended for or really suitable for the type of complaints that are so common in a financial services setting. So they're clearly expensive, it's a time-consuming process, it's a highly adversarial process, whereas the Ombudsman service is fast, it's efficient, it's relatively low cost, it's accessible without the need for legal representation. And there's also, a potential to preserve a relationship. I mean, sometimes when people are complaining about a financial services firm, they're no longer a client, but often they are still a client, and both the firm and the consumer are interested in getting this problem solved and getting on with their business relationship. And so, it's an important alternative to the courts in that way. There are also, though, public purposes, which speaks to why governments and regulators around the world support financial ombud services that are outside of that individual client relationship. So, first and foremost, but perhaps a bit theoretical, but it's that idea of access to justice. When you have a complaint in a financial services setting, there's very often huge disparities of information, of resources. It goes without saying that the financial products and services are complex in nature. The regulatory backdrop that they operate in is highly complex. Certainly very poorly understood by the consumers and investors that are interacting with financial services firms. And so if a problem arises, there's a sense of kind of a potential for like a David and Goliath kind of issue where the client might feel that they really don't have access to justice in that situation. So it's providing an outlet for that. There's also a kind of a political reality, which is that when things go wrong in the financial services space, they can sometimes go wrong for a lot of people all at once. And when that happens, people start looking to the government, to regulators, of what's happening here, why isn't there anything, where's the solution for these people? And so having an accessible and relatively efficient place where aggrieved clients can go that is credible and independent and can deliver fair outcomes is really an important feature. Increasingly, another benefit that gets more and more relevant with each passing year, and as computer systems and so on get more advanced, access to system-level data is something that seemingly everybody wants. So, a financial services ombudsman doesn't see the complete picture of what's happening in the financial services system. There are millions of, happy, successful transactions happening all the time. But what we do see, and what we see quite clearly, is where those points of highest friction really are, that like little tip of the iceberg where things are just really not working from the consumer or investor's perspective. And rightly or wrongly, like whether there's a compensable harm there or not, that's a specific view of the financial services space that everybody's very interested in. Certainly regulators are very interested in, governments. The industry is quite interested, and the public is interested. So that's where the idea of, being able to drill down, having appropriate databases and case management systems so that we can offer those insights is really very important, and it is around the world. And of course, consumer confidence is critical to the financial services sector. People have choices about where they're going to put their money here and around the world, right? And if we expect people to participate willingly in kind of giving their money to a bank or an investment firm, they need to have trust and confidence that they can do that, and if things go wrong, that there will be a fair outcome for them, right? So it all feeds into that public purpose. So that's a bit about financial ombudsmanship generally. Getting back to OBSI, really looking at our key stakeholder groups, we have three, right? So there's the consumers that reach out to us for help. They need an accessible dispute resolution service. They've got a problem. They're not really caring about the system or anything. They just want a solution to their problem. And they want to not have to hire a lawyer. They want to be able to access that easily. So that accessibility point is important. Firms, they have a problem too. They have an unhappy client. They have a claim that they're not able to resolve. And so that's a problem. And then they also may have a client and a relationship that they want to preserve. So there's an important need. And then regulators are interested in generally strengthening investor protection and also increasing investor confidence. So those are the three kind of key groups of stakeholders that we're working with. And the way that we meet those needs is by providing responses to public inquiries and fair, independent investigations of complaints that are within mandate for us. And we also work on awareness raising and knowledge sharing using the information that we have. And then, what we can specifically bring to the table to deliver on that, we have I think, a very credible claim to being independent and to being trusted by the various stakeholder groups. We provide a fair and impartial process. We are very cost-effective and efficient in doing the work that we do. We have professional and experienced staff. We can offer unique insights into the financial services space. We are accessible. We're free to consumers. We provide all of our services in French and English, and we also can provide basic services in some other languages as well. And we've been doing this for over 25 years, so we have a depth of experience that we can bring to bear. So we have over 1,500 participating firms, as I mentioned. This is a chart, and I'm sure you cannot read the words at the bottom, but I've got a laser pointer here, I think. So this is banks, credit unions. So we've got 116 banks, 85 credit unions, and that's all the credit unions from BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, or most from Alberta. We've got investment dealers, so 176 investment dealers, that would be formerly IROC dealers, 93 mutual fund dealers. We have 280 exempt market dealers, 322 portfolio managers, and then 429 EMD PMs, so the dually registered. 25 other, these are mostly restricted dealers, and then 6 scholarship plan dealers. There's only 6, but they're quite large, and they have a very unique complaint profile. So those are the sectors that we serve, and that's who our participating firms are. Oops. This is a chart of our. It's not an org chart, but it's like a functional diagram of the work that we do and who's doing it. So we've got our senior management team here. We have public assistance and investigation services. So that is the work of our case assessment team, our investigation teams, and our analyst teams. So we have kind of manning the phones and doing the case intake. We have trained bilingual specialists who do this response to the public when they're reaching out to us. Our investigators and investigation managers come from a range of backgrounds. We have some lawyers, we have some certified financial analysts, and people who have experience in the industry and generally have worked in the industry. And then our analyst team, who does our loss calculations and does our risk ratings, they are all chartered financial analysts, and they're there to make sure that we are employing industry best practices when we're doing those tasks, and that we have consistency and a high degree of competence in our loss calculations. So those groups represent about 80% of our workforce. And then we also have, our internal administration, our external communications and stakeholder relations. And actually the head of our communications and stakeholder relations team is here with me today. It's Mark Wright. He'd be happy to field any questions as well. So that's who we are. I'll speak a little bit about our strategic plan, just because I think it speaks to what our goals are, how we see ourselves, and what we're hoping to accomplish. We've broken it down into three what we call success pillars, but three kind of chief categories of goals. And every year, our business plan and our accountabilities are all built around these success pillars. So the first one is public assistance and dispute resolution. Obviously core to our business. It's providing effective responses to the public, providing fair and independent investigations, and delivering kind of a high quality of service in that regard. And also exploring innovation in this work. So we're always looking for opportunities for increasing efficiency, looking at new technologies, looking at different ways that we might be able to improve on that core work. We also have communications and awareness and thought leadership. So this category relates to helping raise public awareness, both we don't invest a lot in raising general public awareness, but certainly in helping ensure that when people have a problem that they know that we're here and that we can help. Providing thought leadership on public consultations and that sort of thing. Building relationships with stakeholders and really advancing kind of policy around access to ombudsman services. So that's the second success pillar. And then the third one is organizational resilience and continuous improvement. A little bit more of inward-looking goals that are really focused on having a culture of continuous innovation, hiring the best people and ensuring that they're engaged. An important one here is delivering high-value services to participating firms, right? So we understand that most of those 1,530 firms don't have a complaint with OBSI in any given year or even in a range of years. So we've thought about, well, what can we provide besides being there in the event that you have a client complaint that you can't resolve. What we've developed are a few tools that we think might be helpful. So the first is the firm portal. Like all firms that are members of OBSI have access to the firm portal. You can do some basic administrative things through the portal, changing address or contact information or that kind of thing, paying fees. But you can also access the case information and data about your own firm's complaints, as well as the complaints experience that OBSI has had for your sector, right? So you can see like a side-by-side, what was the volume, what were the issues and products that were involved in the complaints for both you and your sector. We also have launched the Firm Help Desk. So this is really, it's an email inbox that if you have a question that one of our staff would be able to help you with maybe it's about our approach to a particular type of problem or just getting ideas about how to resolve a dispute that you're dealing with. We're happy to receive those and put you in touch with the member of our staff that would be best able to help you. We'll also provide historical risk ratings. If we've done them on a particular security for a particular time frame, we're happy to share those. We won't run the risk rating for you on that particular issue, but we have a very extensive database of ratings that we've already done. And then we also have the data cube that we've published, which is a interactive tool on our website Again, providing information around our case experience. It's a Power BI based tool, so you can sort of click in and click on your sector and click on the date range that you're interested in and be able to see our historical experience in an interactive way. We're also working on, we have not yet launched this, but we're working on providing a suite of kind of sample letters or tools that you might be able to use in your own internal dispute resolution practice. So, we're certainly aware that, especially smaller firms might not have a high volume of complaints, and it can be trying in the situation when there's somebody reaching out who is unhappy and there's a complaint on your hands, and that's a difficult time to be developing policies or developing letters. So being able to provide those resources. So we're looking forward to launching that later this year. And then finally, being accountable is the last sub goal here, which is, evidenced by our external reviews and our public, our transparency and accountability for the work that we do. Okay, so in terms of continuous improvement, we've done a lot. We've been very fortunate, in the period leading up to the pandemic, to have had about a 5-year period of relative economic calm, period when complaint volumes and demand for our services was relatively steady, and we were able to kind of take stock of our organizational systems and really modernize a lot of the background systems and support systems that we have. And they're enumerated on the slide. There's a whole lot of things that I won't read, but we, modernizing our organizational practices. We developed a new case management system. We developed, some strategic planning processes, new terms of reference, a lot of those sort of core organizational sort of foundations. We also improved our efficiency quite a bit. We launched a new case management system. We did a digital transformation, like moving into cloud-based computing and VoIP-based communications and so on. We looked closely at this stakeholder value question and what we are actually doing for the firms and the consumers and the regulators that are working with us, and did things like developing a new website, changing our communications to all kind of plain language communications, launching the firm help desk and newsletters and that sort of thing. And then finally, minimizing our enterprise risks, taking stock of those risks, looking at things like our financial reserves and our IT security, and really making sure that those systems are robust. On the financial side, this is a chart of our financial sort of 10-year history, a very basic one. The blue line here at the top is our budget. This ranges, in the last couple of years it's increased above 10 million, but the range has been between $8 and $10 million a year for the last 10 years or so. It's gone up in the last couple of years, specifically in response to consumer demand for our services. The gray line is our actual expenditures, so you can see we track fairly closely to budget. The dark blue line here is our reserve fund target. So as you can see, and then the light blue line here is our actual amount of financial reserves, which you can see were 0 back in 2011, and that was a real impairment for the organization in terms of being able to respond to fluctuations in demand. So we built up that operational reserve, and we've been pretty well it's been fully funded for the last few years. Okay, so looking at the inquiries question. So this is this slide pertains to those people reaching out to us for help, whether it's on the phone or whether it's an email or web form. Canadians call us Last year, 10,600, more than 10,600 people called us looking for assistance. About 14% of inquiries, and this is a figure that's pretty consistent over time, about 14% actually convert into in-mandate cases that we then investigate. But then there's the rest of those cases. So on this slide, you can see that we've got, not very visible here, but there's, we typically have had around 4,000 or 5,000 complaints a year. But the last couple of years, that's just steadily climbed, and 10,000 is a record-breaking year last year, double what we had a couple of years ago. And then here we can see an overview of where they went. So about a third were referred back to the firm. So these are cases where the person has come to us, but they have not yet completed the dispute resolution service that their firm is offering. So we make sure that they are aware of what how the process works, and that they have the right contact information to get in touch with the right people at their firm. Another 2,000 or so, we provided information. They had a question, they needed information, we provided it. About 1,200 were referred to another dispute resolution body. We only have a certain mandate, and there are other dispute resolution services for example, insurance or other kinds of consumer disputes. So we make referrals. We actually opened 1,071 investigations last year. And then there's some that are categories of, like, we were copied on correspondence and didn't need to do anything, misdirected inquiries, and so on, some other smaller categories. Okay, so a bit about our process. So let's just say it's one of those cases that has gotten through. It is not redirected elsewhere. It's a case that's come to OBSI. So we're going to have an initial complaint, and then and this is usually the consumers contacting us. They have an unresolved complaint against a participating firm. So it's at least at its heart within our mandate. But that's going to be the first analysis. Like, is this complaint really within our mandate? Has it been brought in time? Like, is it about an issue that we actually will consider? Is it about a participating firm? Has the consumer been through the dispute resolution process at their firm? So they need to have had either had a substantive response letter from the firm, or 90 days has passed. So the regulations say that participating firms have 90 days to deal with a consumer complaint and provide a substantive response letter. If not, then the consumer can come to us at that point. And then there's going to be a result. Either it's in mandate or it's not. If it's in mandate, then what we will do, well, if it's not in mandate, we'll explain the reasons why and provide information on that. If it is in mandate, though, we ask the consumer to sign our consent letter. So the consent letter has a few purposes. It outlines what the consumer can expect from our process. They commit to participating fully, to maintaining confidentiality and a few things. They also give us permission to access their private information from the firm. So and then when they do that, then we request the file from the firm, which should be available because the firm will have had the opportunity to review the complaint. And then we investigate. So the investigation really consists of examining the materials that we have, looking at what the consumer has provided, what the firm has provided. Usually it involves interviewing both the consumer and the firm, sometimes in an iterative way. So if we learn something from the firm, we might go back to the consumer, and there's a bit of a inquiry that goes on in both directions to try to get to the bottom of what has taken place. Right? And we make sure that both parties are aware of what the other is arguing, and that we've heard fully from both about what their response is to that. We may conduct our own research and analysis, depending on what the situation is, and we may conduct our loss calculations if that's required in the case. And then there's going to be an outcome of that investigation. So if there is no compensation warranted in the situation, then we fully explain that to the consumer. We copy the firm on the correspondence, but it's really at that point about making sure that the consumer understands why we've arrived at that decision and is aware of the fact that, you know, in our view, they haven't lost money, or they have been treated fairly, or, you know, there was nothing untoward has happened. So it's either that or compensation is warranted in the circumstances. And then we will move on to phase 3. Throughout this process, we're going to try to be facilitating a settlement. So our goal is to get to a fair outcome as efficiently and as quickly as we can. We don't take steps that are not necessary to advance that objective. So we try to facilitate a settlement. If at any time the firm and the consumer agree on a settlement, then the case is closed. If there's a disagreement, though, about a compensation, then we will progress and draft an investigation report. This is a detailed report that sets out what happened, what our findings were, the reasons why we're recommending what we're recommending. Both the firm and the consumer will have the opportunity to comment on that draft. Sometimes at that point they'll take the opportunity to present more evidence, because, you know, sometimes it's not until people see things really written down that they kind of crystallizes what the what the issue was. But there's a further opportunity to make sure that we have all the evidence, and then we will finalize the report. If the firm accepts the recommendation and makes a fair offer, then the case is closed. The consumer doesn't have to accept the offer. The consumer can pursue other avenues of redress. They might court or whatever, but our work is done. If the firm rejects the recommendation, which happens very, very rarely, then our final step in our process is to basically publish our investigation report. It's a name and shame system, so that's you know, where we will publish the investigation report, the findings, naming the firm. And having said that, we do that, as I say, very rarely. I think in the last, we've been in business 27 years, and I think we have about 20 or 21 publications, and you can find them on our website if you're curious. So that's the process. We've been dealing with very significant fluctuations in case volume over the years. This chart actually shows about 20 years of case experience. So this is starts in 2023, or sorry, 2003, ends in 2022. The blue line is banking complaint volume, the orange line is securities complaint volume, and then the gray line at the top is total complaint volume. And as you can see, things were all well and good until the financial crisis. This is 2009, 2010. These were very high peaks. We saw really dramatic increases in both banking and investment complaints. And it was a very high period. We opened about 1,000 investigations, which was just pretty challenging at the time. There was then this period of relative calm, as I mentioned, and then this is the pandemic period. So in 2021 and 2022, both years exceeded 1,000 investigations opened. The pandemic led to just a significant drive increase in demand for our services. 2023 is going to be even higher, but it's really been a busy period, I'll say. Luckily, though, during those years, we dealt with the same complaint volume we saw in the financial crisis with no backlog, and we're able to respond. So those investments in infrastructure and efficiency in those intervening years really did pay off. This is a chart of our average days to close an investments case. So in this chart, the orange line is straightforward cases, so cases that are less complex. The blue line is all cases, and it ranges from 2016 to 2022. As you can see, in 2016, we were averaging around 80 days for a straightforward case and 140 days for average case. and that's now down to around 30 days for a straightforward case and around 70 days for a standard investments investigation. So a pretty good improvement in efficiency. Case outcomes. This is when we get to the end of an investigation, this is a look at the last 5 years of our case outcomes. So we actually recommended compensation in about 30% of investment cases. But people received compensation in about 40% of investment cases, and that's really because when the complaint arrived at our door, there was already an offer of compensation on the table. When we looked at the case, we didn't recommend compensation, but nevertheless the firm reoffered that goodwill gesture, and so that's the reason for the discrepancy there. But importantly, in the chart below, you can see the numbers, right? So the total amount of compensation, the average amount of compensation. As you can see, the average compensation ranges from about $9,000 to about $20,000 a year. That's the average, though. But even that average is skewed by a relatively smaller number of higher value recommendations. So our median compensation recommendation is between $2,000 and $4,000 in a given year, all right? Which I think paints a picture. We do sometimes have cases that approach 350, and so those are important cases. But the vast majority of the work that we're doing is kind of high volume, relatively low claim value cases. Okay, the next slide is an illustration of our firm surveys. So every year we survey every investment firm and every bank that uses our service. So it's every investment firm that has had a complaint with OBSI in the previous year gets a survey, and we ask a range of questions about the courteousness of our staff, knowledge, experience, and so on. The green bars are the positive feedback. So, we do get very positive feedback from the firms that have used our service. One of the most notable is on this metric, which is the agreement with the statement, OBSI added value to our firm's complaint handling process, 81% positive and then 10% neutral, which is, that is the one question we think of as kind of like the global question. And it's an encouraging result. We, of course, have free-form answers as well, where people can type in their reasons for satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and we do read all of those and pay close attention. And every year we publish these results. This is actually just a screen grab from our annual report, and we publish an action plan based on what we've heard from the users of our service. The lowest favorable feedback, which is down here, is the statement, OBSI staff clearly explained our firm's membership fee. So in response to that, we've revamped our invoices, we've changed up some of our communications around fees to try to address that dissatisfaction. From consumers, we also survey every consumer that uses our service. Consumer satisfaction is very, very highly correlated to case outcome. And consumers who get what they wanted from our service think everything that we did was fantastic, and consumers who don't get what they wanted from the complaint are a lot less favorable about everything. And so we look at it we look at the two categories separately. On the right is people who were satisfied with the outcome of their case, who were generally quite positive about everything, and then dissatisfied consumers. Still not inconsiderable numbers of satisfaction, but there's a lot more dissatisfaction when the outcome hasn't been what people were hoping for. All right, fees, always an important topic. I want to just describe to you how we get to the fees that we ask from participating firms. So we're a not-for-profit organization, but we operate on a cost recovery basis. So every year we are going to set our budget based on our forecast of case volume. Case volume is highly related to the number of staff that we're going to need, and about 85% of our budget goes towards staffing. So, our annual budget is established, and then it is divided amongst the five industry sectors. And the guiding principle is that no industry sector should subsidize another. Okay? So all firms are obviously grouped into one of the 5 industry sectors, and that those sectors are allocated a proportionate share of our budget, and that proportion is based on the number of cases and the complexity of cases that sector had in the previous year. So, so it's a rough approximation of the resources consumed, the proportionate amount of the resources consumed by that sector. Okay, clearly there are some cases that are very simple and straightforward to close. Others are much more complex, require detailed analyses and so on. So we do have a rating of the complexity of each case, and that goes into this weighted kind of proportionate usage of our resources that each sector has. So that's how that division happens between the 5 sectors. And then within the sector, the allocation to each individual firm that is a part of that sector is based roughly on size. Okay? Different sectors have different ways of that we use as a proxy for size. So in some cases it might be assets under administration. In other sectors, it's the number of representatives that the firm has. So just to illustrate that, there's our budget. The budget is divided between deposit taking, credit unions, SRO, so the investment dealers, mutual fund dealers, non-SRO, which is the EMDs, PMs, and a few other categories, and then the scholarship plan dealers. So scholarship plan dealers are a little bit of a special case, and even though there's only 6 of them. So there's 116 banks, the trust and loan companies, a couple of mortgage brokers in the deposit-taking space. The credit unions are provincially regulated credit unions. SROs are the investment dealers, mutual fund dealers. Then we've got the EMDs, PMs, and the others, and then the 6 scholarship plan dealers. So that's how the sort of the cascading of the allocation works. So the current operating and policy environment, what's happening right now in terms of OBSI? There's kind of been a lot happening. The recent events have been what everybody's been facing, the pandemic, moving to hybrid work for our workforce, record high demand levels for our service. We've done very well, I think, in the face of that. We've increased our cases closed year over year for this year by over 80%. We have new online case opening processes. We've developed some technological tools that can help consumers digitally access our service without needing to be on the phone with a person. New strategic plan, and we've concluded our external reviews in this past year with strongly positive results. I'll share those high-level results with you in a sec. And we've launched our data cube, which I mentioned, that can help people kind of self-help their own information about our case experience. So those are some performance highlights. One of the big policy discussions that's happening right now is around binding authority. The CSA has committed to moving forward with a proposal on binding authority for OBSI, and that is the kind of the most recent step in a very long conversation about this. We have independent external reviews every 5 years. We started in 2007. So the 2007 review recommended binding authority for OBSI, so did the 2011 independent review, so did the 2016 independent review, and so did the 2022 independent review that we just concluded. The reason the reviewers explain, really quite fully, I think, in those documents, the rationale why they're recommending it is quite common internationally for ombuds services to have binding authority. And so it's an important initiative. Consumer groups are quite interested in this issue as well. And so that discussion is moving forward. My understanding is that the CSA is continuing with that work, and they've committed to doing a public consultation on a proposal perhaps later this year. So that has been, that's been quite active. Another background piece to that is that the Ontario Capital Markets Task Force did a deep dive into Ontario's capital markets and made a whole extensive list of recommendations. They also recommended binding redress for investors in Ontario. The federal government has also announced an initiative to move from a two-ombudsman system for banking to a single ombudsman system for banking. So we provide that service to most Canadian banks, but there is another service that provides that service to a couple of the big banks, and there's been an announcement of that system is going to be coming to a close, and there'll be one moving forward. So that is that's been announced. I think it's in the legislation that the Budget Implementation Act that the Senate's considering right now. So that I would expect to move ahead in the very near future. And that was something that's been recommended in multiple spheres as well. So looking forward, what does the future hold for us? I think there's two big things. The first one would be continuing very high demand levels. Like I think what's driving consumer demand for our service is like, these are structural changes that have been happening. I think we're going to continue to see very high demand. And I think there'll be some outcomes of some of these very long-term policy initiatives on binding authority, on the sole ombudsman question for banking. I think those, we're going to see some actual outcomes there. So that's what's happening in our policy environment. I mentioned the external reviews. We did just conclude external reviews for both our banking and our investments mandates. Since we have different regulators for each mandate, we had two separate reviews, but they were done by the same reviewer. These are required in our terms of reference. It's an obligation that we have for our regulators. And what the reviewers do is they do a very deep dive. They have completely open access to everything within OBSI, our policies, procedures. They have access to all of our staff. They do a deep dive on 75 kind of randomly chosen cases. They look at the complete case file. They look at the evidence, the discussions that happen internally, the reasons, the outcomes, and they look at a range of different case types. And they also do extensive interviews with stakeholders. So they heard from, I think, basically all of the industry associations, as well as consumer groups and regulators as well. The overall findings were really very favorable to OBSI. The main conclusions that on the security side were that we met our obligations under our regulatory kind of framework. They said that we dealt with complaints in a timely manner, that our investigators identified key issues and requested additional documents when necessary, that our investigators were skilled at doing their work and assessing credibility, that they kept the parties apprised of the progress and explained their views clearly, and ultimately that our reasons were fair, proportionate, and explained in plain language, and that our conclusions flowed from the evidence. So those are really important findings because, of course, our case files are confidential. We don't publish them. We publish case studies, and we have an occasional publication of a refusal. But for the most part, our process is a bit of a black box, and so these external reviews are really important for, I think, giving assurance to parties that use our service that we're providing a high quality service. But there's also, it's not just all accolades. They make recommendations for improvement, which is, of course, an important function of the reviews as well. And the key recommendations were for binding authority on the security side. They also recommended that we undertake a governance review. to look at especially how we receive input from consumers and from industry stakeholders. How does our board receive that information? And they recommended a move away from the industry and consumer representative sort of system that we have, considering other models of input. We did a public in response to this, we did a public consultation earlier this year on our governance. We had got a lot of good feedback, and actually we're going to be announcing the results of that review in the coming, I think next week. So that'll be coming soon. They also recommended that we do a public consultation on our exempt market loss calculations. So loss calculations for cases that involve illiquid securities. And this is something that they heard from industry participants about. They thought it would be, they did look at our methodology, they thought it made sense, but they thought we would benefit, and maybe the industry would benefit from a consultation process. So we plan to actually do that, just to be completely clear about how we approach these cases, how we approach this calculation, and seek input on if there's any way that we could be doing it better. They also recommended that we work with the JRC on systemic issue reporting, and that we expand our thought leadership activities. So, the full report is on our website. It's a bit of a long read, but it's pretty informative. All right, so just to close out the presentation, I'll just speak a little bit about some of what we're seeing, our most recent case trends, looking at the last 8 quarters. So these are trends, this is the overall trends, the total number of cases we've opened. If you look at this chart, you'll see that this is securities, is the green line at the bottom. It would be very notable that securities are at the highest level they have ever been in Q2, but it's dwarfed by the fact that banking is at an even higher level. And you can see that there's been a sort of a gradual increase in securities complaints, a very steep increase in banking complaints. That's because of some changes to the Bank Act that took place in the middle of last year that have really reduced attrition for consumers that have a complaint against a major or against any bank. So very high complaint volumes, but we're keeping up with it pretty well. In terms of looking at the investment sector specifically and where these cases are coming from, the dark green line here at the top is investment dealers. The turquoise line here is mutual fund dealers. So we can see that there's been a fairly steady, except for this very last quarter, there's been a bit of a declining number of complaints coming from investment dealers, but a pretty sharp increase in the mutual fund dealer complaints. The green line here is restricted dealer. As you can see, it was like 0 leading up to the beginning of this year. This is Q1 of 2022. And now it's now our 3rd largest category. The restricted dealers are the crypto firms. So this is a new category of registrant that is using our service, and they have fairly high complaint volumes. They're mostly related to crypto fraud. The light blue line here at the bottom is the scholarship plan dealers, and then portfolio managers and EMDs have relatively low complaint volumes on each quarter. By region, we can see that there's been a fairly significant increase basically in all regions. The top line here is Ontario. Next would be Quebec. We group BC, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan together, and they're here. It's this green line kind of in the middle. So we can see that there's been a pretty significant rise and in more or less all areas, but that's consistent with the overall complaint volumes that we've seen. In terms of what the complaints are about, the products are listed here. This bright green line, which has been really increased in the last couple of quarters, is mutual funds. The dark green line is common shares and equities. The blue line is crypto assets. So again, this mirrors the restricted dealer line. There's been a lot of complaints about crypto, scholarship trust plans, and kind of other at a relatively low level. And then finally, the issues. So what these complaints are about, the big noticeable issue here is this one. This is suitability complaints. So suitability complaints have been sort of coasting along at a relatively moderate level for several quarters, but we've seen a real increase in the last couple of quarters to kind of a record high level, really, in the last quarter. The green line is also notable. You can see it goes from 0 about a couple of years ago to our second most common complaint, which is fraud. And this is crypto fraud. Right? These are almost all related to those crypto firms. Instructions not followed and transfer delays rounded out. So that's the investment issues that have been trending, and that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks again to the ASC for inviting us to come. Appreciate it.